Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Jazz Talk Show. Today, we will discuss about a major policy overhaul to the education system in India that has been brought last year by the current Indian government. Though this is about the education system in India, it is a topic which I believe is relevant for people anywhere in the world. A better method of educating children, if it has worked in any part of the world, is something parents anywhere else would always be interested to learn from. The new education policy is a major change in 34 years. It aims to bring more choices and create collaborations between students that study completely different subjects. It is trying to bring down the dropout rates for students through a varying range of measures. It is trying to create a greater skilled workforce through teaching a wider range of subjects which are relevant to current times. Having said that, it is also important to say that there is a lot of merit to the previously existing education system in India as well. Over the past few decades, the existing system had created a large population of highly educated students who had to pay very little for an extremely great quality of higher education. It had created a whole generation who have made a lot of difference within India and abroad and have been one of the main instruments of creating the India story. Today, we will discuss about this and try to bring more details about it into the forefront. Today, we have the great pleasure of having with us Mrs. Ujjani Mukherjee, an Associate Professor of Economics from Behala College in Kolkata University, Mr. Ravi Vishwanathan, who is an alumnus of IIM Kolkata. He was in BEL before he became the co-founder and CEO of an IT startup company for knowledge management in Bangalore. He is currently the COO of an IT healthcare company in UK. And we have with us Dr. Nilesh Khare, who is the Dean of Jagrad University in Bhopal and was previously a visiting associate professor in Ohio State University. Welcome to all of you. Today we will start the discussion with kids' education in primary schools. My first question will be to Ujjani Mukherjee. There are quite a few changes to primary educations that have been brought in the new policy, and I'll outline them before I ask you the question. There would be, according to the policy, certain bagless days to promote just creative thinking, and there would be learning through storytelling and lesser use of rote learning. To include different learning abilities, there would be a varying degree of toughness to subjects like English, maths, etc., so that you do not pass or fail, but you can pass at a different level of toughness. The exams at school years 3, 5, and 8, corresponding to the age groups structured of 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, would be addressing a continuous evaluation at different stages rather than just at a board exam. Do you think the primary education has taken a major step forward in a positive way and become more inclusive for students with varying learning abilities as well as for special needs children and from those with disadvantaged backgrounds?
Thanks, Shreya. Yes, sure. I think it is a paradigm shift, particularly with respect to primary education or the school education rather. I would like to highlight on 5 points very briefly. First is that there has been proposed a change in the pattern and structure of school education. Presently, it is 10 plus 2, and from that, we would be moving to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. And more importantly, the age group of 3 to 5 children, they are being brought under the ambit of school education. Now, this is already there today. It is prevailing and people go to the play schools, but those are definitely private play schools, and only the urban or the economically better off families can afford to send their children to these play schools. But by allowing this age group, because I think this is a very formative years for a child, and by bringing them into the school system is a very remarkable step. But then, the question is, how are they to be managed? Who is going to teach them? Because that needs a very specialized training to treat those children. They need a very specialized training. And there has been a proposal that Anganwadi workers will be trained for this. Now, how it works out remains to be seen.
Right.
Secondly, the proposal aims to develop the cognitive skill and the critical thinking of students. That it says that we should be moving away from rote learning, which is prevailing in the present times, right? So if you don't want to feed the child with some data or information and want just to them to reproduce them as it is, then this is a very appropriate step. And but I think for this is a paradigm shift, and we have been used to the system of rote learning through these days, and a shift in this respect means there should be a massive change in the curricula. That is, the textbooks must be written in such a way, the exercises would be in such a way that it should try to assess the critical or analytical thinking of the child. And there should also be a change in the mindset of the teachers, because their duty is to not only teach what is there in the textbook, but also instill the analytical power. And
Can
third
I
is,
ask you one thing here, Ujedi? Do you think different abilities of learning has been included in this policy? I mean, children with special needs of learning,
yes,
or how do you think that has been addressed?
yes, obviously, because the differently abled, there is no such policy in especially the government school regarding the differently abled presently, but it has been specifically spelled out, which I think is a very remarkable step. And secondly, for different capabilities, now the present system is that we have a bias for streams, science, arts, commerce. These are specific streams, and when the child goes to the secondary education level, they have to choose between these. And the thing that there will be different levels of difficulty in the exams for, say, maths and English, as you said, that should enable the teachers to find out what is the actual skill or capability of a child. So it is better to hone their skill and channelize them to their respective fields. So inclusiveness in school is, I think, addressed, right?
Okay, wonderful.
And another
I'll
thing,
have to go to Nilesh now. I'll ask something specific about this to Nilesh. Do you think that this difference in the toughness of a certain subjects in the exams that they have brought, is it going to create more of a segregation, or is it actually going to positively help children in any way? Can you tell me this?
Thank you so much, Jaya, for having me here.
Pleasure.
To answer your question specifically, it kind of baffles me, to be honest with you. I have been thinking about it. What does it really mean? Different level of toughness. So if you are going to segregate the exams and allow people to self-select themselves into different level of exams where they can score differently. So on a high toughness exams, medium level marks, and on a low toughness exams and a very excellent marks, are they going to be equal? When are we going to promote students? How are we going to compare? In general, the idea of exam is that any exam so there are two objectives behind exams. First, it provides a feedback to the learner himself or herself that where you have reached. And secondly, it serves as a signal to the market. In a pre-job situation, it's for promotion, and for the beyond graduation, it's for the job market signal. So if you have the varying degree of toughness, if you give this exams as an internal exams for a learner to evaluate themselves, monitor their progress, and then customize the responses to where they are in the learning journey. Therefore, they can custom create their own method during the year. And the toughness actually is for them, their internal consumption. That seems like a reasonable way.
But I would just ask you one thing, that sometimes it's either a pass or a fail. Now, you cannot gradually evaluate that maybe somebody has an ability to pass at this level. That part is not there at the moment in the education exams. So we do have that in the GCSEs, where you have a higher level of maths and a lower level of maths. So just to show that it is possible to pass, but pass at a lower level instead of completely failing. So what do you think? That is that a good step?
So, so I don't call it the toughness of exams. I actually call it toughness of course selection itself. You self-select yourself into an advanced math. If you're an advanced math program, then you're in advanced math. The exams are then set for the content that you have in advanced math. The passing marks are still 40% or whatever you may decide that that's going to be passing marks. So people who do normal math, they will do the normal math. And then you are going to, on your mark sheet, have these, and this would serve both. This would serve an external signal. People who have taken advanced math, they have taken advanced math, and they could actually be waived off from certain requirements for, say, college math. I mean, this happens in the US too, right?
Okay. I'll quickly have to go to Ravi.
Sure.
Ravi, what do you think of the previous answers, if you have to say something? And the other thing is, what do you think of introducing exams at years 3, 5, and 8 instead of just the board exams? It's going to be detrimental to students, putting them more pressure on them.
I'll take this question first. Thanks for having me here, Jaya.
My pleasure.
Introducing exams at levels 3, 5, and 8 is a good move. Today, what's happening is students are taking exams, even though there are no exams per se. They're taking exams at school, and each school does it differently. And if the aim of the policy is to have exams at levels 3, 5, 8, and then go take the board exams at 10th and 12th, I think it's a great move. It is not a question of pressure. It is a question of getting used to getting yourself tested. So these are all precursory things that people need to, students need to get used to before they take the more serious board exams. I agree with this. And adding to what Jenny was alluding to in terms of the primary education itself, obviously the policy calls for a different level, different kind of education, which is not just rote learning or textbook based learning. And here is where the policy has set out its objectives, and it is now up to the market or to people like us to make sure that these things are implemented. And the way it can be implemented is through the good use of technology. So it's a question of teachers. We have a big shortage of teachers and training those teachers. So can we take a different outlook here and look at technology as a medium of learning? And that's what I would say is the need of the hour.
Okay, wonderful. I'll come to the next question. Yeah, go ahead.
May I quickly respond to the exam part of it, right? I actually find it very interesting. So I just wanted to add an observation here.
Yeah.
There is always a flip side of this that we need to think about. So I remember that people used to talk about board exams. They still talk about board exams, where they place more importance to the board exam than the non-board exams are taken for granted.
Yeah.
So I think when you differentiate in exams like this, you create a mentality that certain exams are more important than others. Maybe the other exams are not trustworthy, or it's not about learning, but it's actually about certain exams, which are going to be life defining.
Yeah.
Following Bush's No Child Left Behind, and trying to ensure that the school system lives up to the quality expectation that the US system has, they decided to actually create an exam, which is the district level or a state level exam. But then the schools and the kids are actually given an option that if they want to rate themselves relative to other students in the same grade, then if they want, they can write a separate exam. So think about what we have, right? The GATE exam that actually in some sense gives option in India for engineering graduates, that if they really want to understand that how they fare in certain exams relative to others, they can do that. So, if you make an exam mandatory and create one exam, give it a higher status than others, there is a signal that we need to be worried about in terms of how it's being interpreted and handled. Even school teachers also, they teach very differently for the board exams versus other exams. So I think all of that need to be taken into consideration. I'm just going to stop here.
Wonderful. Yeah, just conscious of time, Nilesh. Nice point. Ujjaini, I know that you have been part of studying about vocational training even before this policy came into place, about how that impacts children. So what do you think about the new set of subjects that they are trying to bring about? And do you think that would create a kind of ownership for children when they take up a subject that perhaps looks like it is going to create a skill for their own lives? And will that actually help in bridging a huge gap that is there in the skilled force in India? One of the biggest gaps of skilled labor is there in India, and in most of those areas which they are talking about introducing in school. And do you think it's the right age to introduce them? So give your thoughts on this.
Well, Jaya, to answer your question, first of all, there is a difference between, I think, skilled labor and semi-skilled labor, because vocational training can at best produce semi-skilled labors. Suppose in tailoring, carpentry, these cannot be defined as skilled labor. So, but the idea is that in our country, there's a huge amount of dropouts, and to a largest extent, this dropout is due to poverty or the inability of the families to send their children to school, not only because they have to incur direct costs, but also because of the opportunity cost. And the students, the children are compelled to go out for the job market, that is as child labor, even though there are, laws prohibiting child labor, but the fact is child labor still exists. And in many cases what happens is that the parents cannot relate the education with their requirement. They find that it is useless to send their children to school, because with the kind of education, kind of knowledge they acquire in school, that is not going to help them. So from
the money, okay.
Yes. So from that perspective, I think starting the vocational training right from an early age, from class 6, is very, a positive step, because over there they have the exposure to find out which vocation can they opt for. And this is, I think, particularly true for the rural population, the rural schools, or the economically backward people, children. So that gives them a scope to identify their skill, and perhaps that also gives them a chance to continue with that vocation in their later stages of education, so that everybody does not need to go for higher education. Higher education, I believe that higher education is not for everybody. So those of the people, the students who want to opt for vocational training, they can directly move on to that vocation after passing out their a secondary examination, and that places them in a better position even in a skilled labor market, because rather than learning by doing, they have the required skill. So definitely there is a skill enhancement.
Wonderful, Jenny. I'll come to Ravi on the next point, which is partly related to this and partly related to my next question. So, as Ujeni was saying, the dropout rates is this could potentially reduce that. And my point is that there is, I think, quite a few measures that has been taken to reduce dropouts, one of which is to accumulate, aggregate credits at different stages of the education and keep that nationally. And so that people can, even if they drop out, there is not a huge barrier to rejoin again. And the kind of education, the subjects that they're teaching perhaps makes more sense for them to earn a living, which could also be another measure of reducing dropouts. So my question to you is, what do you think has been done in terms of reducing dropout? Does this policy take a huge step towards addressing that?
I'm not sure if it takes a huge step in reducing dropouts. So it does not stop dropouts, but it actually addresses the consequence of dropouts. In today's circumstance, if a person drops out, he or she has actually dropped out. So this policy actually says you can drop out and come back whenever it is convenient to you. So it actually doesn't reduce dropouts because of the factors that Ujjaini mentioned. Why do people drop out? Poverty, and they see that there is no point in studying because this does not help me earn a living. So this policy does not actually directly address not dropping out.
If I may add one point here, that is, sometimes when you drop out, maybe at that point of time in your life, you have a issue with your family or with your economical condition, but then it's difficult to come back to it because you might have to start from the beginning if you have not gotten aggregated marks. So actually creating this kind of aggregation of credits at different levels, does it make it easier for a comeback? Even if you have dropped out, a comeback and then finishing it, that way, is it a measure that helps people to finish a course of study?
Yes, absolutely. See, I mean, the fact that you can come back and pick up from where you left is a great policy statement. How it can be implemented, we'll have to see. That is going into the details of implementation. But it's a great policy statement saying that your education is not just a certificate at the end of class 5, class 8, class 10, or class 12. It is a continuing process. To that extent, the policy addresses the question of dropouts.
Okay, wonderful. Nilesh, you want to add anything more to this, or I could actually go to the next question, which would be to you.
Just two quick points here. One is that I think I anticipate a statistical artifact because what is happening is that National Academic Credit Bank is a good idea. But so after the first year, you're going to say that people have earned certification. After the second year, it's a diploma. After the third year, it's a degree. After 4 years, it's honors degree. I mean, that's the idea. So you're going to restructure the undergrad program in college. If you drop out after first year, you walk out with a certificate that may have some market value. Because today, if somebody goes out after first year, unless you are taking transfer and continuing your education, you may have to actually redo the entire thing. So now you don't have to redo the first year. What is not clear in the policy though, is the fact that for how long that credit actually remains entertainable. So can you come back after 3 years? Can you come back after 4 years of gap? Are we still going to recognize all those credits? So I think that's still not very clear.
Yeah,
till such point in time that people are allowed to come back, they may not be considered completely dropped out. So I think if you're not going to consider them drop out, they're dormant but not dropped out. So I think you are likely to see some statistical artifact in terms of how you assess how many people have dropped out or have not dropped out.
Yeah,
it would be difficult to assess that. Ravi. Yeah, I would agree with Ravi that the policy per se doesn't do anything in terms of dissuading people from dropping out. Although what it does is that it probably gives them something rather than nothing when they want to drop out, and then allows them to come back. My guess is that at some point in time we'll get the clarity in terms of how long before they would be disallowed from actually coming back.
Okay. Wonderful point. My next question to you, Nilesh, is this, that we have actually talked about in many cases about there being a kind of silos in terms of the higher education, where we create a science stream, an art stream, and certain other streams, music stream, etc., where we sort of have a tendency towards giving a higher credit to people in sciences and giving them a very elitist position, whereas there is actually a huge amount of requirement for people from all streams to be there. Now, there is, I think, quite a bit of addressing of this in terms of them coming up with the idea of basically mixing them, allowing a little more choice in terms of mixing quite varied subjects together for your higher education. Now, I would want you to give your opinion on what you think about it. Now, there is a thought that if you study maths, a related subject needs, or if you study physics, related subject of maths has to be studied. But there are quite a few students that I've seen in my life who are passionate in maths and passionate in history. And there is really not a clear way for them to do both of them at the same time. And though you do not need to study a chemistry or a physics with maths, you're forced to study it because it's a science stream. So I would want to ask you, there are two things in my mind that it tries to address. One is to break away that elitist thing of a science and engineering stream and combining it with a few others. And the other thing is possibly there would be a passionate driven study of higher education. And the third thing I think is it would create a more holistic way of creating children where they have a wider range of learning. What is your, and your opinions might differ, but I thought that these are the three things that could be positive towards it. But what is your thinking about them trying to mix, allow a mixing of different subjects which are completely different?
So thank you so much. This is a very interesting question. So let me first address the elitist part of it. And I have heard several times people actually don't like that science, and I come from engineering science. I need to disclose this. So people don't like that, the science and engineering is actually put on a pedestal. But whether it's a STEM efforts in the US or China's a specific effort to actually get the American educated Chinese back since mid-80s to build up its own capabilities. I've lived in the UAE. I also saw, by the way, today they were expecting the Hope, which is their probe to Mars, to actually land on Mars. And there is this huge interest at the country level. So the reason why these streams have become elitist is because they offer high value add jobs possibilities. There is no other reason.
Yeah.
Right? If you could provide a historian a job that can provide the equal value add, I think people would begin to actually find history very elitist. That's not going away because that stands regardless of education policy. That stands because the way the economy has developed, innovations, and where they come from, the commercial innovation, the comfort, the new products and services, and all of that. Unfortunately, understanding of history has not been able to produce new products and services for which people, like iPhone, for which people are willing to pay money. I think so that there is a reason why we consider science and then engineering elitist. So that's one. That doesn't mean that history, arts, and other kinds of non-science subjects are not important, not valuable. There is an inherent value for society in them. So it's the value is different from the why society considers something elitist. The second component of your question is, see, there is ability for people to move away from science to non-science subject. So suddenly, if engineering third year, if I decide to read up to, say, European history, I can begin with the European history. But then if somebody who is actually in third year history wants to come to engineering third year or start the mechanics, it's going to be very difficult to do so. I have rarely seen few people that come to my mind who were exceptional, self-taught, and could get into engineering or science somewhere, in the middle of their life, then decided to pursue it. So there is a body of knowledge for which you need ongoing systematic training on which you accumulate your knowledge. Science, engineering, mathematics follow that. Having said that, what I would say is that as and when there is a feasibility, there is a choice and there is a reason. Does system allow you to do that? So I'll go back to Steve Jobs. Before he dropped out, he actually went to attend a calligraphy class that allowed him to see the potential in fonts, which actually made the one of the design principles in his entrepreneurial venture with Apple. So I think there is a lot of opportunity in combining these eclectic set of exposure.
Right.
It is
I'm
not
a bit
possible
conscious
for
of
everybody.
time. So I might have to, if you want to add one more point to this, otherwise I'll have to go to Jenny after this.
No, I think so I think my message is very clear.
Yes.
The elitism is not going to go away, and the ability to switch is good, but then that switch is still going to be asymmetric because it's possible from certain type of combination of courses to others, but not the other way around. But this breaking up the silos and giving people a choice is an important thing, because it would allow this eclectic set would allow the students to recombine knowledge in a way that is that creates innovation and adds unanticipated value.
Right. Ojeni, your take on this, please.
See, I have two concerns over this. The first is that I think we need to admit that education is nothing but human capital, right?
Yes.
That means that ultimately it is something which is to be marketed, right? So apart from developing holistic, we are talking about holistic development and extracurricular and so on and so forth. But then ultimately, the objective of every education system is to, earn a living. So from that point of view, I think that suppose a student in physics also studies music, but will it give any value addition when he goes out to the job market? Or if another student is there who has physics along with, say, mathematics and computer science, so I think it would be very rational for the employer to opt for the second person. So I think from that perspective, one might choose for some subject which is not related to his core subject for his passion up to a certain level. But when you are after your graduation, when you are actually at your higher studies, when you are targeting your job market, I think this relative subjects are become more important. One, and a second concern is that the feasibility, because even now under the UGC mandate, there is a choice-based credit system in Vogue, we call it CBCS, and under it, it is theoretically given that any student can choose any subject from any college. But from my own experience, I find that this is only theoretical, because it is not possible for an affiliated college to offer all the subjects to a particular student, and it is simultaneously not possible for a student to run about to different colleges to study different subjects. So for that, we need, and that has also been proposed in the policy, that, phasing out this affiliation. So autonomy is to be given to each of the colleges. And that is, I think, a huge process, and the viability, feasibility of autonomy and the infrastructure, the quality of faculty that come along with autonomy. Then there is the question of uniformity among all the colleges. These are all, I think, matters of concern which should
One
be taken.
quick question at the end. do you think, I do understand there is a lot of challenges in implementing such a thing as this, but would you think if we park the thoughts about employment and park the thoughts about creating that atmosphere in a college where they are able to offer, as a student who passes out with a choice of different kinds of subjects, do you think it's going to create a better, more holistic student? You know, as a person who can gel better with the society, or gel better with communities and understand people around them, and contribute to people around them better in that context. Ujjaini, for you. Did you hear my question? So
I can answer that, Jaya. I can
Jenny,
okay.
Yeah, if
Okay,
I can
go
answer the
ahead, and
question.
then I'll come back to Ujjaini again.
Yeah. So yes, the answer is a simple yes, where it's a question of choice, and there is a connection between the science and the so-called non-science subject. Science, maths, and physics have a connection to music, and art has a connection to maths. And it's a question of how you can open up your mind for two other possibilities instead of just going in one stream. So the simple answer to your question is yes, it's going to broaden the horizon of a person taking different subjects, although on the face of it, they're not related. If you straitjacket them into science, commerce, and arts streams, we find people narrowly trained. So if we want people to have depth in certain areas, but a broad understanding of various other adjacent subjects.
Yes.
So this policy, and world over, that is why you have everything in one place of learning, whether you call it a higher education institution or a university or whatever, it is there in one place of learning, accessible for people who will make use of it. So in reality, how many people make use of it could be 20%. And those 20% you can see go on to become entrepreneurs, go on to become creative individuals who will then provide employment to the 80% of people who have narrow education. That's what I would say.
Okay, as Nilesh pointed out, the case of Steve Jobs, who learned calligraphy with engineering. So very good point. Thanks, Ravi. I'll have to wrap it up because conscious of time. I'll just come to each of you at the end to just give me about a 1 minute take on what you think overall, whether it's a good policy, it's a policy which is a major change, or it's not a major change, implementable, practical, whatever is your thought, or any particular point that we have not covered here if you want to add. But we have to keep it within a minute of each speaker speaking. So can I come to you, Nilesh, first, and can you give a sum up of whether you think it's a positive step?
I think my 1 minute take, as you said, is this is a normative policy to me, which actually spells a lot of what should be, but it's aspirational. If I were to score the policy in terms of its realism in terms of what is achievable, where the bigger challenges are, and the factoring the implementation, I think I will have to score this policy very poorly.
Okay. Thanks very much. How about Ujjaini? Can you tell me within a minute what you think as a summary? You have to unmute it.
The first clause, that is raising the percentage of expenditure on education to 6%, that has been attempted since long back, and in none of the policies that has been achieved. So this time also we have to wait to see whether it is achieved or not actually. And regarding the policy itself, I think that it regarding the school education, I think there are more positive things in vogue regarding college or higher education. I have really concern regarding the implementation part, because it might take a long time in implementation, and I think it is not that easy to switch over to this policy within a few years.
Yeah. Just one thing, as a step, if we just think of it as a step forward, do you think it's a positive step? I mean, the policy itself, does it look okay to you? I mean, I understand the challenges of implementation, but overall, the look of the policy, does it look positive to you?
Yes, obviously, the theoretically it looks nice, although there are a number of pitfalls, and I think this policy has been designed by the involvement of a lot of people, from experts to grassroots level people. So I think there is need for more debate, more introspection, before we can say whether, in a word, whether it is good or bad.
Wonderful. Wonderful answer, JD. Thanks very much. Over to Ravi. What do you think of the policy in general?
I think the policy is a good step forward. The reasons being, you have to state something for it to be actioned upon. If you don't state, nothing will happen. So from that direction, this policy at least is working like a policy. It looks like a policy saying that these are the steps that we will take to change the education system in India from where it was to something better. So what is that better? Has it gone back to the old ages where we called ourselves Vishwaguru and other things? I don't think so. It has taken into account what is already available in the Western society and tried to put in a few Indian values or a few Indian adaptations to the policy. And I think it's a good policy. So once a policy is stated, question of implementing it is completely another matter. And if I have to go back to what I said in the beginning, this policy is implementable if it is used in conjunction with technology implementation. It cannot just be done by the hundreds of years of what we call as chalk and talk in terms of teaching. So that's what we've been all doing, chalk and talk, and we have to move away from chalk and talk into something different. So
Wonderful.
keep this policy as the backdrop and move on to implementing as much as possible of the policy. So to that extent, to answer your question, this is a good first step in terms of an educational policy that was long overdue.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much for coming and giving a really valuable set of opinions and a very engaging discussion. Thanks all of you. Good evening to you all.